Michael, can I just ask a question about this? Because a second ago you're talking about Israel, you were talking about your concern that China was going to go for Iran in an alliance, but now your concern is that China is going to engage with Israel. Which one is your concern? I just want to make sure I'm responding to it, because you can't have both of those at the same time.
Sure, it can.
So you think that your actual concern is that China is both going to enter an alliance with Iran and Israel, both of whom are enemies of one another in the region? Because that's a contradiction in the premise of the question.
Not at all, not at all. Because what I see happening is I see China empowering the most disruptive element in the Middle East, which is Iran.
But then you're also concerned that they're going to have an ally of Israel if we're not.
I'll explain. It is with its right hand, it is empowering Iran, which is threatening all of our allies. And because I don't see anything different in your foreign policy premise than the premise of the Biden administration or the Obama administration.
I understand the impeachment by analogy to Democrat.
No, it's not. No.
Use an actual argument.
I'm making an argument. I'm making an argument.
Put aside whether it's Obama or Trump or anybody else.
We're not providing a defense umbrella to our allies, and they recognizing that, and they feeling that we're on our way out, that we're halfway out of the region already, are hedging towards China, and China understands that. China is exploiting the contradiction in our policy, which is precisely the contradiction that you are presenting, where we only give half a guarantee to our allies in the face of a rising Iran, and so they have nowhere to go. They're looking for a place to go. They go to China.
So I think you would have a different view. I think Iran and China.
China wants it wants to be the leader in all of the industries that are going to drive military and economic innovation in the next century. And Israel is a great prize for them because it has all of that know-how, plus it's deeply embedded in the American security system.
So I hear you, Michael.
So it's a blow to the American security system and an advantage to their...
You know, with due respect, and I think this is a healthy dialogue, and I think that we're having...
How much respect am I due?
I think a good amount of credit for bringing somebody who disagrees with you and talking to them. I'll give you credit for that. And I try to do the same because we're not having enough critical debate about critical steps that are going to affect this country for the next 20 years. So this is productive in that sense. I do think it is not coherent to at once simultaneously worry that our retreat from the Middle East will somehow create a vacuum for China to at once ally with Iran, but also with Israel, when the whole premise of the discussion was that Iran and Israel, or Iran is fundamentally hostile to Israel. I don't think Israel will work with China.
This happens in foreign policy all the time. Well, the United States is the ally of Turkey and Greece. The United States is the ally of Saudi Arabia and Israel.
I don't think that's so of the scope of concerns, right? So if you have one menu of concerns that if the U.S. pulls out, that somehow China's going to both be allied with Iran and with Israel, and somehow that's hostile to the United States.
It's called divide and rule.
Versus the alternative of the U.S. wasting our resources and militarily distracted at a time when our own resources, stockpiles, and financial capabilities are thin for China to go after Taiwan. That's the risk I worry about far more than the theoretical risk of, through our retreat, when they no longer have those targets to hit, that the boogeyman of China somehow is going to show up in the Middle East. Their top objective is to go for Taiwan, and they're much happier if we're wasting our own resources in the Middle East in the meantime. So if I had to pick between those two sets of concerns, it is, as it relates to China, it is abundantly clear to me that the U.S. being mired in conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere, and running thin on our own resources to be able to defend our interests elsewhere, to be able to go after Taiwan in the near term, which is a core, vital Chinese Communist Party objective, versus the vague idea that they might fill some void with Iran and Israel, but without even being really clear about what they're accomplishing for themselves or anybody getting out of that relationship, it's not even clear to me which is the greater concern. And so that's the way I look at it, which is why I think we need to have our eye on the ball. Communist China is what we need to focus on. Taiwan matters for the U.S. national interest in a way that, for example, Ukraine does not. We need to be prepared to defend. But for me to stand up and say as the U.S. president that we will defend Taiwan, it better darn well be credible that we can even defend Taiwan. And we're not going to be able to do that when we're in multi-front wars that don't advance U.S. interests in the meantime.